billion.
Sorry? What?
$15 billion. That's how much money the richest athlete in human history made, and I guarantee you've never heard his name.
Hold on. 15 billion. That's not possible. Nobody makes $15 billion from sports.
One guy did. 2,000 years ago in ancient Rome by racing chariots.
You're having me on?
I am absolutely not having you on. His name was Gaius Apuleius Diocles. He was born in 154 AD in what's now Portugal, and when he retired at 42, he'd made more money than Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Tiger Woods, Cristiano Ronaldo, and every other athlete you can think of combined.
Combined? Combined?
Combined. Not even close, actually.
I'm okay. I need a minute. You're telling me some random Roman bloke made more money than Jordan and LeBron put together and nobody talks about him?
Nobody talks about him. And I'm about to ruin your entire week with these numbers.
My week's already ruined. Jackson woke me up 4 times last night demanding stories about butterflies. Let's go.
So Gaius Apuleius Diocles. Born 154 AD in Lusitania, modern Portugal. This is during Emperor Antoninus Pius's reign. One of the rare emperors who didn't get assassinated or start massive wars. So
relatively boring times for Rome.
Relatively peaceful, yeah. Which just means political backstabbing at a 6 instead of a 10. Anyway, Diocles wasn't rich, wasn't noble, probably came from a working class family, maybe lower. We don't know much about his childhood because Romans didn't care about athletes' backstories. They just wanted the show.
Ancient influencer culture. Nobody cares who you are. Just post the content.
Exactly. But here's what we do know. At age 18, in 172 AD, he entered his first chariot race at the Circus Maximus.
And he won?
He came in second.
Not bad for your first race.
Not bad, but also not winning. And in chariot racing, second place meant nothing. No prize money, no glory. Just thanks for coming. Try again next week.
Harsh.
Very harsh. And then he raced for 2 more years, 2 full years without winning a single race.
2 years?
2 years of showing up, risking his life and losing every single week.
I can't even commit to going to the gym for 2 weeks. And this guy's racing death chariots for 2 years with 0 wins.
0 wins. And here's the thing, chariot racing had about a 10% fatality rate. 1 in 10 chance you die every time you race. So he's doing this over and over, watching people die around him and just not quitting.
That's either the most committed human being ever or completely mental.
Probably both. Monica says I'm obsessive about screenwriting, but at least my laptop's never crushed me to death.
Fair point. Though you did throw it once when Final Draft crashed.
That was different. That was justified rage. But then, and this is where it gets good at age 20, he finally wins. And once he figures it out, he becomes absolutely unstoppable.
How unstoppable?
Over his 24-year career, he raced 4,257 times.
I'm sorry, 4,000.
4,257 races in 24 years.
That can't be right. Hold on. Let me do the math.
177 races per year, 3 races per week, every week for 24 years straight.
That's absurd. That's literally absurd. I can barely remember to take the bins out once a week. And
out of those 4,257 races, he won 1,462.
Wait, what's the percentage?
34% win rate. And he placed in the top 3 56% of the time.
That's better than my daughter's success rate at staying in a bed all night, and she's only got 1 opponent's sleep.
So you're saying Jackson's worse at sleeping than Diocles was at chariot racing?
I'm saying Jackson's a menace, and apparently so was Diocles, though at least Diocles got paid for his chaos.
But here's the really crazy part. Those aren't just normal wins. These were races where you could die, like actually die, crushed by wheels, trampled by horses, dragged around the track by your own chariot because the reins were wrapped around your waist.
Hold on. What?
Oh, yeah. Standard practice. You'd wrap the reins around your waist to control the horses with your body weight, freed up your hands.
But if you crash...
the horses drag you to death unless you cut yourself free fast enough.
Cut yourself free?
Yeah. They carried a knife. Small knife, tucked in the belt. You crash, you've got maybe 2 seconds to slash through the reins before you're being dragged under 4 galloping horses going 40 miles per hour.
I'm sorry, I need to stop you right there. Are you telling me this man raced 4,000 times with reins wrapped around his waist and a knife as his only safety equipment?
Correct.
And he survived all 4,000 times?
all 4,257 times without a single major recorded injury.
That's not luck. That's divine intervention. That's God looking down and saying, yeah, all right, you're too good to die.
Or incredible skill and strategy. But yeah, possibly divine intervention.
Okay, I need you to explain how the money worked, because $15 billion seems impossible.
Right. So chariot racing was organised by these teams called factions, 4 main ones: the Reds, the Whites, the Blues, the Greens. Think of them like Formula One teams or Premier League clubs.
People had favourite teams.
People were obsessed with teams, like burn down the city obsessed. There was this riot in 532 AD called the Nika riots, where fans of the Blues and Greens literally torched half of Constantinople and killed 30,000 people because they were angry about race results.
They killed 30,000 people over chariot racing.
30,000 people, nearly overthrew the emperor, all because their team lost.
That's English football hooligans times a million.
Times 10 million. So yeah, factions were serious business and they paid their star racers accordingly. Diocles raced for 3 different factions over his career. Started with the Whites, then the Greens, then the Reds.
He switched teams. That's like
LeBron going to Miami, yeah?
People must have been furious.
Oh, they threw rocks at him, literally, in the street. But he kept winning, so eventually they forgave him. That's sports.
So the factions just paid him millions?
Billions, actually. When Diocles retired, they carved his career earnings on a monument 35,863,120 sesterces.
Sester what?
Sesterces, Roman currency. Now, historians calculate the modern equivalent based on purchasing power, like how much grain you could buy, average worker salaries, that kind of thing. Some estimates say 15 billion, some say 18 billion. Even the most conservative estimates put him at 10 billion.
10 billion is the conservative estimate?
Correct.
I'm having a crisis. I can't process this. Valerie's going to come home and I'm just going to be sitting here mumbling about Roman billionaires.
To be fair, you do that anyway.
Okay, rude. Accurate, but rude.
But here's where it gets controversial.
Oh, good. I love controversy before breakfast.
Some historians argue the 15 billion figure is inflated, that it's based on shaky currency conversion models and doesn't account for economic differences between ancient Rome and modern society.
Okay, so maybe it wasn't 15 billion. Maybe it was 10 billion. My point stands, he was obscenely wealthy.
But the critics say even 10 billion is probably too high, that we're comparing apples and oranges because the Roman economy worked completely differently than ours.
Right, but they carved the number on a stone monument. 35 million sesterces, that's not made up.
No, but how we convert that number is subjective.
All right, then let's do it this way. What could Diocles buy with his money?
Well, he could have bought multiple large estates, thousands of slaves, entire businesses.
So he was rich enough to own a small city?
Probably several small cities.
Then I don't care if it's 10 billion or 15 billion or 20 billion. The man was absurdly wealthy. That's the point.
Fire.
And you're telling me nobody today knows his name?
Almost nobody, yeah.
That's criminal. That's historically criminal.
Welcome to being an athlete. You're only remembered if you transcend your sport.
Well, making $15 billion should transcend your sport.
You'd think...
All right, walk me through a race. What did this actually look like?
Okay, so picture the Circus Maximus. Massive oval track, 2,000 feet long, 400 feet wide. Down the middle, there's this raised barrier called the Spina, covered in statues and obelisks. Very fancy. At each end, there are these tight turning posts called the metae.
So it's a giant oval with a wall down the middle.
Exactly. And 12 chariots would race around it 7 times, 7 laps, about 5 miles total. And the noise, imagine 250,000 people screaming, horses thundering on stone, wheels clattering, whips cracking, just this wall of sound hitting you.
250,000 people?
The Circus Maximus held 250,000 spectators. That's bigger than any stadium we have today. The biggest NFL stadium is like 100,000.
So this was a Super Bowl every single week?
Every week. Multiple times a week sometimes. And the crowd was loud. Screaming, chanting, throwing things. And the smell, think about it, dust everywhere, horse sweat, 250,000 unwashed Romans packed into stone seats in the Mediterranean heat. Like if Coachella was held in a stable
That sounds horrific.
That was peak entertainment.
12 chariots? That sounds like chaos.
It was chaos. 4 factions, 3 chariots per faction. But here's the thing, not all 3 chariots were trying to win. Usually only 1 per faction was the actual contender. The other 2 were blockers.
Blockers?
Their job was to slow down or crash the rival faction's main guys. So it's like NASCAR meets Demolition, Derby meets Game of Thrones.
With horses.
With very fast, very angry horses.
And the most dangerous part was the turns?
The turns were a nightmare. These tight 180-degree turns at each end. Come in too fast, you flip. Too slow, someone passes you. And if you get boxed in by rival factions, you're basically done.
How many people died?
Lots. We don't have exact numbers, but it was common for multiple charioteers to die in a single event. And when someone died, they just drag the body off and keep racing.
They didn't stop the race?
The show must go on. You've got 250,000 people in the stands. One dead guy's not stopping the entertainment.
Okay, so Diocles is racing in this death circus 3 times a week for 24 years, making $15 billion, somehow not dying. What made him so good?
Strategy. He didn't just rely on speed. He studied his opponents, learned their patterns, figured out weaknesses.
So he was tactical.
Super tactical. There's this one strategy he was famous for. He deliberately let opponents take the lead early, let them burn out their horses, then overtake them in the final lap.
That's risky.
Extremely risky, but he calculated the risk was worth it and he kept winning, so clearly it worked.
That's like game theory in ancient Rome.
Exactly. He turned chariot racing into a thinking man's sport, which probably also kept him alive. If you're not recklessly smashing into people every race, they're less likely to smash into you.
So he was smart and skilled.
And lucky. You don't survive 4,000 chariot races on skill alone. And here's another thing that made him special. He raced in multiple chariot configurations.
Multiple what now?
So there were different types. The bigger 2 horses, the quadriga 4 horses, most common, the triga 3 horses, super awkward. And then the absolute madness of the 6-horse chariot.
6 horses?
6 horses. Imagine trying to control 6 galloping horses simultaneously while also steering and not dying.
I can't even control my daughter when she's had too much sugar. 6 horses sounds like a nightmare.
It was a nightmare. Most charioteers specialised in one type, usually the quadriga, but Diocles won races in all of them. He was ridiculously versatile.
So he was good at everything?
Good at everything, smart about tactics, insanely consistent, and apparently immortal.
I'm starting to think he wasn't human.
I've considered that theory.
Maybe an Olympic god.
So here's something that'll blow your mind even more. Diocles didn't just win races, he won them in the most difficult ways possible.
What do you mean?
Okay, so there were different categories of wins. Normal wins, sure, fine. But then there were specialty wins that paid extra and gave you massive bragging rights.
Like what?
Like the come from behind win. You're in last place for most of the race, then you overtake everyone in the final lap. The Romans loved that drama, so they paid double or triple the normal purse.
And Diocles?
Had hundreds of those wins. He was famous for it. He'd hang back deliberately, let everyone think the race was over, then boom, final lap, he'd destroy everyone.
That's showmanship.
That's calculated showmanship for maximum payout. He understood entertainment value as part of the job. You could win boring races and make good money, or win thrilling races and make insane money.
Brilliant. What else?
There was the inside lane win. Starting from the inside lane was harder because you had less room to maneuver. If you won from there, bigger purse. Diocles won from the inside lane hundreds of times.
Of course he did.
Then there was the solo victory when you're so far ahead, you basically lap the field. Super rare. Diocles had a bunch of them. And then the most prestigious, the early lead victory. You take the lead on lap 1 and hold it for all 7 laps. Total domination, start to finish.
Let me guess.
Hundreds of those too.
This guy's starting to sound made up.
I know, right? But the monument exists. They carved all his stats into stone. It's basically ancientbaseballreference.com.
We need to build him a statue. A massive statue.
He probably had several. They just didn't survive. But here's where I disagree with most historians.
Oh, here we go. Mike versus the entire academic establishment.
I think Diocles was absolutely the greatest athlete in history. Not just richest, greatest.
That's a bold claim.
Think about it. He competed at the highest level for 24 years in a sport with a 10% fatality rate and won a third of the time. Show me a modern athlete with that kind of longevity and dominance in a comparably dangerous sport.
Modern athletes don't have comparably dangerous sports.
Exactly, which makes my point. Diocles was doing something objectively harder than anything athletes do today, and he did it better than anyone else ever has.
Okay, but you can't compare ancient sports to modern sports. The training is different, the technology is different, the competition level is different.
The competition level was insane. There were thousands of charioteers in the empire. The best of the best made it to the Circus Maximus. Diocles wasn't just beating local guys, he was beating the elite.
Right, but LeBron James plays basketball at a level of skill that...
LeBron plays basketball in climate-controlled arenas with referees and medical staff and a 0% chance of death. Diocles played his sport in the dirt with no rules and a constant threat of being trampled by horses.
That doesn't make him better, it makes him crazier.
It makes him braver, more skilled, more dedicated, and more successful. Greatest athlete ever. I'm standing by it.
You're wrong, but I respect the conviction.
I'm right, and you'll realise it by the end of this episode.
All right, fine. Let's talk about his horses, because you can't win without fast horses.
Correct. And Diocles' horses were insanely valuable. A top-tier chariot horse could sell for the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
For one horse?
For one horse. And you needed 4 for a quadriga plus backups in case one got injured or killed. So the factions were dumping millions into their stables.
That's like Formula One teams spending on car development.
Exactly. The stables were massive operations, hundreds of horses, trainers, veterinarians, groomers, the whole thing. It was an industry.
Did Diocles have favourite horses?
Probably, yeah. Some horses got famous in their own right. People knew their names, bet on them specifically. And there are stories of charioteers who got so attached to their horses that when one died, they'd refuse to race for weeks.
That's actually quite sweet.
It is. And Diocles raced for 24 years, so he definitely had horses he was close to. You don't do this job that long without bonding with your animals.
Okay, so here's what I don't understand. If Diocles was this famous, this wealthy, this successful, why isn't he more well known? Why do we talk about him like we talk about Julius Caesar or gladiators or whoever?
Because chariot racing disappeared. After the Roman Empire collapsed, the sport basically died out in Western Europe. Only place that survived was the Byzantine Empire, and even there it eventually faded.
So people just forgot about it.
People forgot the sport, so they forgot the athletes. It's like if football suddenly stopped existing in a few centuries, no one would remember Pele or Maradona.
That's depressing.
Very depressing. But also, Diocles wasn't a military figure or a politician. He didn't conquer anything or write philosophical treatises. He was just really, really good at racing chariots.
But he was the best at it for 24 years. That should count for something.
It should, which is why we're talking about him right now.
Did he have rivals? Like other charioteers specifically trying to beat him?
Oh, absolutely. Rivalries were huge. They'd play them up for the crowds, make it personal, really lean into the drama.
Like professional wrestling.
Like wrestling, yeah. Except with way higher stakes. Some rivalries ended in death, whether deliberate or accidental is hard to say.
Did anyone ever try to kill Diocles?
Probably. I mean, it's chariot racing. People die. Whether someone specifically targeted him for assassination, we don't know. But given how famous he was, he definitely had enemies.
How do you deal with that psychologically? Knowing someone might try to murder you every time you race?
You compartmentalize, or you just accept it's part of the job. Athletes today accept the risk of injury. Ancient athletes accepted the risk of death.
That's a hell of a lot more than injury.
Different time, different culture. Death was just more normalized. But here's something cool. Diocles had a reputation for being a clean racer.
Clean? You said this sport was demolition derby with horses.
It was, for most people. But Diocles was different. He rarely crashed other racers. He didn't rely on dirty tactics. He just outran everyone.
How do we know that?
Because the Romans kept track of crashes. They recorded how many times you caused a wreck, how many times you were in a wreck, all of it. And Diocles' crash rate was remarkably low.
So he was the best and the cleanest?
Pretty much, which made him even more popular with crowds. He wasn't a thug. He was a legitimate athlete.
That's actually really impressive. In a sport where everyone's trying to kill each other, he chose to just be better than everyone else.
Exactly. And that's probably another reason he survived. If you're not making enemies by crashing people every race, they're less likely to target you for revenge.
All right, so let's talk about the factions again. He switched teams 3 times.
Started with the whites, moved to the greens, finished with the reds.
And people were furious.
Oh, massively furious. Fans were insanely loyal, like generational loyalty. Your grandfather was a Blues fan, your father was a Blues fan, you're a Blues fan forever.
So when Diocles switched, it was like Messi leaving Barcelona for Real Madrid.
Worse, because instead of angry tweets, it was actual riots in the streets.
Why did he switch?
Money. The Reds offered him a better contract than the Greens, so he took it. Athletes have always chased the money.
Did the fans forgive him?
Eventually, yeah, because he kept winning. If you're good enough, people forgive you for anything. But here's the interesting thing. The factions weren't just sports teams. They had political power.
Political power?
They could mobilize their fan bases to protest. Taxes, laws, whatever. When you've got 50,000 angry fans chanting in the Circus Maximus, emperors listened.
So the factions were like ancient lobbyists.
Exactly. They had wealth, influence, public support. They were power brokers, and charioteers were their stars, their public faces.
So when Diocles won, it was a political statement.
Whether he wanted it to be or not, yeah, he was part of this whole system of power and influence.
Did emperors try to control him?
Probably. We don't have records, but it makes sense. Emperors love chariot racing. Some even raced themselves, though they were usually terrible at it.
So they were ancient rich kids buying their way into motorsports.
Literally, yes. Like if Elon Musk decided to race Formula One but had zero talent.
I'm pretty sure Elon could beat Jeff Bezos at Formula One.
Okay, I've got a morbid question.
Go for it.
Did Diocles ever witness someone die during a race he was in?
Almost certainly. Given how many races he did and how dangerous they were, there's no way he didn't see multiple deaths.
That's horrific.
It is. And there's no way that doesn't affect you. Even if you're used to violence, watching someone get trampled right in front of you has to leave a mark.
Did the races stop when someone died?
Usually not. They drag the body off the track and keep going.
That's cold.
That's Rome. One person's death wasn't going to stop the show for 250,000 other people.
All right, so we've talked about his career, his money, the danger. What's the bigger picture here? Why does Diocles matter?
Good question. On one level, he doesn't matter. He was a chariot racer. He didn't change history.
But
he represents something important about Roman culture. He shows us what Romans valued, what they celebrated, what they were willing to pay for.
So he's a window into ancient Rome.
Exactly. When you look at Diocles, you see a society that prized competition, spectacle, entertainment, a society where an athlete could become one of the wealthiest people alive.
That's actually kind of beautiful in a twisted way.
It is. Because it means even 2,000 years ago, people understood the value of sports. They understood that entertainment could bring communities together, create shared experiences, build legends.
Do you think Diocles knew he was part of something bigger?
Probably not at first. He was probably just trying to win races and not die. But by the time he retired, he must have realized he'd become legendary.
The monument suggests he knew.
True. Monuments like that don't get built unless you're really important.
Good for him?
Good for him indeed. But here's where I think you're wrong about something.
Oh, good. Another Mike theory.
You said earlier that modern athletes couldn't handle chariot racing. I think you're underestimating modern athletes.
I'm not underestimating them. I'm saying they're not built for it. Modern athletes train for specific sports with specific equipment and specific safety measures.
Right, but they're also more athletic overall. Better nutrition, better training methods, better understanding of biomechanics.
Doesn't matter if you're more athletic when a horse kicks you in the head.
But a modern athlete, someone like an Olympic decathlete or a Formula One driver, could probably learn chariot racing and excel at it.
Maybe they could learn it, but could they do it for 24 years? Could they race 3 times a week with a 1 in 10 chance of death and maintain a 34% win rate?
I think someone with the right mindset could, yeah.
Name one modern athlete who'd survive 4,000 chariot races.
I think Lewis Hamilton could do it.
Lewis Hamilton races cars with seatbelts, roll cages, and medical teams on standby. Diocles raced wooden boxes with no safety equipment and a knife as backup.
Hamilton's reflexes are insane. His tactical thinking is world class.
Diocles' reflexes were also insane. His tactical thinking was also world class. Plus, he did it in way worse conditions with way more danger.
Okay, fine. You're right.
Thank you.
Modern athletes are soft.
I wouldn't say soft. I'd say sensibly risk averse.
Soft?
You know what? Fine. They're soft. Happy now? All right, so let's get back to Diocles. What happened after he retired?
We don't know much, actually, which is weird because you'd think someone that famous and wealthy would leave more of a historical footprint.
Did he die right away?
Probably not. He retired at 42, which was young by normal standards, but ancient by chariot racer standards. Most either died young or retired in their early 30s because their bodies couldn't take it anymore.
So he got out while he was ahead.
Smart move. Better to retire on top than risk one more race and end up dead.
Did he have family?
We assume so, but no records. Romans didn't care about athletes' personal lives. Once you stopped performing, you stopped being interesting.
That's sad. You dominate for 24 years, make $15 billion, become the most famous athlete in the empire, then nothing.
That's ancient celebrity culture. You're only as good as your last race.
You know what keeps blowing my mind about this?
What?
The sheer scale of it. 4,000 races over 2 decades in front of hundreds of thousands of people with constant mortal danger. And he just did it week after week, year after year.
The consistency is probably his most impressive quality. Anyone can win one race. Winning consistently for 24 years is inhuman.
And he made $15 billion doing it.
We've come full circle.
Because I still can't believe it. $15 billion 2,000 years ago without sponsorships, without endorsements, without a Nike contract, just pure prize money.
Wild, right?
Beyond wild. It's incomprehensible.
Here's another thing that's wild. Diocles wasn't just famous in Rome. He was famous across the entire empire.
How do we know?
His name shows up in inscriptions and mosaics as far away as North Africa and Turkey. People in Carthage knew who Diocles was. People in Alexandria knew.
In an age before TV or internet, how do you become that famous?
Word of mouth. And Romans were obsessed with spectacle. If you did something impressive in one city, the story spread within weeks. Everyone across the empire knew.
So he was trending, ancient style.
Exactly. And when he traveled to race in other cities, which he did occasionally, it was massive. People came from miles around just to watch him.
Did he ever lose in those away races?
Sometimes. But even when he lost, people still came. That's star power.
All right. So I have a theory.
Let's hear it.
I think the reason we don't talk about Diocles more is because sports historians are biased toward modern athletes.
That's probably true.
Like when people make greatest athlete ever lists, they only consider people from the last 100 years, maybe last 200 if they're generous.
Because those are the athletes with detailed records, video footage, statistical analysis.
But that's unfair to people like Diocles. Just because we don't have video doesn't mean he wasn't incredible.
I agree completely. The absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence.
Exactly. Diocles deserves to be in every greatest athlete conversation, period.
I'll drink to that if I had a drink, which I don't, because it's 10 a.m.
It's always 5 o'clock in ancient Rome.
That's going on a t-shirt. You know what else is interesting? Diocles raced through some of Rome's most chaotic periods.
What do you mean?
His career spanned from 172 to 196 AD. That's Marcus Aurelius, then Commodus, the insane emperor, then the year of 5 emperors where the empire nearly collapsed.
So he was racing while Rome was falling apart?
Not quite falling apart, but definitely unstable. Emperors being assassinated, political chaos, economic problems, and Diocles just kept showing up and winning races.
That's remarkably consistent.
It's more than consistent. It's a testament to his focus. The empire's burning around him and he's like, cool, I've got a race on Thursday.
Priorities?
Correct priorities. Get money, don't die. Ignore politics.
Words to live by.
Okay, final question about the races themselves. What did it sound like?
Actually, wait, you sort of described this earlier, but I want more.
Oh, deafening. 250,000 people screaming, horses galloping, wheels on stone, whips cracking, chariots crashing. Just absolute chaos.
Could the charioteers even hear anything?
Probably not. Which is why they relied on visual cues and instinct. You couldn't communicate with teammates. You just had to trust they knew the plan.
That sounds like a nightmare.
That was Tuesday afternoon.
And the smell? You mentioned it earlier, but...
Oh, horrendous. Horse sweat, dust, human sweat from 250,000 unwashed bodies, food vendors, maybe blood if there was a bad crash, just assault on every sense.
Lovely.
Peak entertainment, apparently.
Romans had a weird definition of entertainment.
They also fed people to lions for fun, so chariot racing was actually pretty tame by comparison.
That point. You know what I keep thinking about?
What?
That monument. The one with all his stats carved into it. Someone commissioned that, paid for it, designed it, built it.
Probably Diocles himself.
You think...
He had $15 billion. He could afford a nice monument.
So he literally paid for his own legacy.
In a sense, yeah. But honestly, that's kind of poetic. He earned his fame, earned his wealth, earned the right to be remembered.
I like that.
Me too.
Here's something I've been wondering. Why chariots? Why was chariot racing the sport?
As opposed to what?
I don't know. Horse racing without chariots? Just riding the horses?
That's a good question, actually.
I think it's because chariots were military technology. Rome built its empire partly on chariot warfare. So chariot racing was like militaristic spectacle. Training for war, but entertainment.
So it was propaganda.
Maybe not intentionally, but yeah, kind of. It kept the military culture alive in peacetime.
That's actually really smart.
Romans were clever like that. Everything served multiple purposes.
All right, so we've spent 40 minutes talking about Diocles. If someone's listening to this and they want to know one thing about him, what should they remember?
That he was the greatest athlete you've never heard of. Dominated his sport for nearly a quarter century, made more money than any athlete in history, survived a job that killed almost everyone else, and walked away on his own terms.
That's a pretty incredible legacy.
It's an extraordinary legacy. And the fact that most people don't know his name is tragic.
Well, hopefully more people know it now.
Hopefully.
You know what, though? I bet there were hundreds of other charioteers who were also talented, who also risked their lives, and we don't remember any of them.
Absolutely. History's brutal that way.
Makes you wonder how many exceptional people throughout history have been completely forgotten just because they didn't happen to get a monument.
Lots. Probably thousands.
That's depressing.
Very depressing. But it also makes Diocles even more special. He's one of the lucky few who got remembered.
Do you think modern athletes worry about being forgotten?
Probably not while they're competing. But later, when they're retired, maybe.
Like, do you think LeBron ever thinks, in 2,000 years, will anyone know who I was?
Probably not, but he should.
We've got video footage now. We've got the internet. That should last, right?
Should, but what if it doesn't? What if all our technology gets wiped out somehow and future civilizations have to start from scratch?
Then we're all forgotten.
Exactly.
Okay, you're bringing the mood down again.
Let's end on something positive.
Please.
Diocles retired wealthy, healthy and alive. In a sport where most people died young and broke, he beat the odds completely. That alone is worth celebrating.
That's genuinely remarkable.
It's more than remarkable. It's unprecedented. Shows that even in brutal environments, skill and intelligence can win.
So there's hope for the rest of us.
Maybe. Or maybe Diocles was a statistical anomaly. 1 in 10,000 who had the perfect combination of talent, strategy and luck.
I'm choosing to believe there's hope.
Fair enough.
All right, final thought. If Diocles were alive today, what sport would he dominate?
Formula 1. No question.
Really?
High speed, high danger, requires insane reflexes and tactical thinking. He'd be Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen.
I can see that.
And he'd probably be just as wealthy. F1 drivers make insane money.
So, in a way, his legacy continues.
In a way, yeah. The sports change, the technology changes, but the fundamental idea, people willing to risk everything to be the best, that never changes.
You know what the real lesson here is?
What?
If you're good enough at something, if you work harder than everyone else, if you take risks others won't, you can achieve impossible things.
That's inspirational.
But also, don't wrap reins around your waist. That's terrible safety planning.
Sound advice.
I'm full of sound advice.
You really aren't.
Rude, but fair.
But seriously though, Gaius Apuleius Diocles, born 154 AD, first race at 18, first win at 20, raced 4,257 times over 24 years, won 1,462 races, made $35,863,120 sesterces, $15 billion in modern money. Retired at 42 with all his limbs intact, the richest, arguably the greatest, and definitely the most forgotten athlete in human history.
And nobody knows his name.
Almost nobody.
That changes today.
Hopefully.
All right, that's our show. Gaius Apuleius Diocles, chariot racer, billionaire, legend, absolute madman. Guy made $15 billion, 15 billion driving horses in circles for 2 decades and somehow didn't die. If that's not peak human achievement, I don't know what is.
Pretty sure it's peak human achievement.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Go tell someone about Diocles. Make him famous again. He deserves it. And remember, $15 billion. Never forget that number.
He really does deserve it.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.